Ocala.
Diamonds in the sunset, now your time has come.
All right, 12 minutes before 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. Our next guest is Dr. Julia Sloan, and she is the principal of Sloan International, specializing in strategic thinking for leaders of business, government, and international agencies. She's a professor of strategic thinking teaching at Columbia University, and that word strategic got me thinking, because I was wondering, do I think strategically? I don't even know if I do. Let's find out if I do, and if I don't, let's find out how to learn. The book is called Learning to Think Strategically. Dr. Julia Sloan. Good morning, doctor. Thank you for being on the air with us today.
Good morning, excuse me. Good morning, Larry, and thanks so much for inviting me here.
Oh, and thank you. Where are you calling from?
New York.
New York. How's the weather today?
Fabulous. Finally.
Oh, good.
Finally, we've got spring.
Yeah, it's beautiful here too. So the East Coast must be doing well today. We got both ends covered here today.
Yeah.
So how do you know if you think strategic? I wonder if everybody already thinks they do. I wonder if we think strategically.
Do you know what? That is actually part of the problem. That's actually what led to my research, is that these terms, strategic thinking, strategic planning, strategic implementation, strategy, all these terms tend to get gobbled together, and they tend to be, or I think the term strategic thinking itself tends to be very trendy, and it's overused, misused, and underdefined. And this is one of the things, I think, how can we develop something, and how can we strengthen and improve something when we don't know what it is? So that was actually what led to my research.
You know, it's interesting. A lot of the things in our world are because of impulsive thinking or because of creative thinking. But I'm wondering if maybe, like, for example, let's just take whoever invented, pick any invention. There must have been an impulse, there must have been an inspiration, but then to make it a reality, they had to be strategic. Am I guessing right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. And what happened, or something that I have done here is, excuse me, take a look at strategy itself as the defining responsibility for leaders. I mean, setting strategy is the core responsibility for leaders. Yet, strategic thinking and strategic planning tend to draw from very different cognitive clusters. So the underlying thinking that supports strategic planning can actually cancel the kind of thinking required for strategic thinking. And this is something that has really seems to have really hit with a lot of people, particularly leaders. And the great thing is, once you tease those two things apart and put the kinds of cognitions for strategic thinking in one bucket and those that support strategic planning in the other, people can see very clearly what it is their strengths are and what they need to develop. And both of these are learnable. That's the great thing.
So if two people are on a team, and the team, that the two-person team has a goal, let's make it real easy to use as a metaphor or an example. Let's say the goal is to drive a car from Ocala, Florida to New York City, okay? From here to where you are, okay. The two if they both put their heads together, they might come up with two different routes. They would both get there, but two different ways, right?
The purpose of strategic thinking is actually not to focus on the solution, but rather to focus on the problem, to say, do we have a real problem and do we have the right problem? And this is most often the piece of a strategy that's omitted, that's just completely left out of the equation. Because we tend to be, just what you had said earlier, we tend to be so impulsive in our thinking and we get rewarded for that. So our focus tends to always be on, find a solution. Quick, find a solution. And we tend to call that strategic thinking, strategic planning. Actually, that's focusing on the solution is strategic planning. The thinking part is focusing on the problem, is getting to New York even our real objective. I mean, is that really our aim? Why is that the aim? Is that the only alternative? Have we thought and have we explored other, what are the variables that we've considered? That's the strategic thinking point, is taking a look at the problem itself. And in order to address this, we need what I call the 2Ds. We need divergent thinking, and we need deep dive thinking.
How do you keep emotion from clouding the issues?
I'm so happy you brought this up. Emotion is something that is almost, we aim to get rid of it totally with strategic planning, because we want rational thinking, linear, logical, very, very crystal clear thinking. Emotion is part of strategic thinking, and you can't get rid of it and shouldn't get rid of it, because the emotion, particularly the fear of failure, tends to be what really drives strategic thinking. And strategic thinking itself is highly intuitive, highly emotional, very irrational, and it's a very messy, divergent process.
Really?
Whereas strategic thinking or strategic planning is a very neat, tidy, linear, logical, rational, convergent, analytical process. So this is where I think our terminology is what really, I think, blurs the ability to learn to think strategically, is we don't know what we're looking for often.
A lot of times people who have a goal will look at how other people achieved that same goal,
Exactly.
or a similar goal, and will basically use them as a recipe, or their way as a recipe for themselves.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. There's a lot of copycat,
Yeah.
which is part of the problem today. Is everybody tends to claim that they want an innovative strategy, yet they tend to be dwelling only on strategic planning, and using what I call, the copycat method,
Right.
or the recipe.
Right.
But what they really need for an innovative strategy is to really focus on strategic thinking, and later focus on strategic planning, and bounce back and forth. And it's that, I think, again, a lot of it goes back to the clarity of definition. And then people get spooked by that emotional piece. That's the number one thing that holds people back. It's not it's not a lack of rational thinking that holds us back.
Mm-hmm.
It's the lack of being willing to tap into that irrational thinking.
One of the things that we do here is to try to interest people in participating in something, or reading a book in your case, or doing something. So right now my strategic thinking is asking me, or telling me to ask you, is there anything in the book that gives like an example of how somebody may have used strategic thinking and it changed the results differently?
Yeah, I have a number of case studies in the book, and I would invite people to go to that. I'd also, anybody who's really interested in doing this, we do learning labs on strategic thinking, and focus specifically on strategic thinking, and it's a blast. It's just so different. It's so not what you think, and it's really about using and tapping into the irrational mind and focusing on the problem of your strategy. And it uncovers, it's almost like a blanket has been covering half the strategy problem. And once we tear the blanket off and look beneath the surface, people just see the issue so differently.
It's interesting. I'm really finding this interesting, and trying to think how I've applied it, or maybe how all of us have applied it in our own lives. And I guess the one thing that came to mind is, for example, in doing the show. I've done it a long time. In the very, very early days of doing it, I was very regimented. And here, this goes first, this goes second, this goes third. But nowadays, I wing it a lot. There's a lot of improvising, a lot of ad-libbing. And that, to me, is a better show.
Yeah, and this is where I think there's tremendous merit, and I highly recommend the strategic planning approach. This very tightly structured, linear, logical. But you miss the other half, which is just what you were describing.
Yeah.
The whole intuitive piece, you've been able to develop your intuition because previously you focused so much on the rational thinking.
Right.
So the two actually really do support each other. And I think in today's really complex, unpredictable environment, people really need strategic thinking and they need strategic planning. But that requires a great deal of agility of thought.
Do you know, I noticed one time that God, or maybe you might say nature, does not draw in straight lines. Everything
That's
is
correct.
a squiggle or a circle. There's a lot of circles out in nature, but there's no straight lines. But
that's
human
correct.
beings, everything is a straight line. Every building,
Yes.
right?
And this is an outgrowth of the Industrial Revolution mindset. This whole, where rational thought became supreme to any other type of thinking. And I think it's been in the last 15 years or so that people have really said, wait a minute, just what you said. There's more to a strategy than just a straight line and just rational thinking.
Wow, this is fascinating. I thank you, first of all, for coming on the air with us, and also thank you.
My pleasure.
We had you on for a longer slot earlier, but then we had to change things. So thank you for accommodating that.
Oh, my pleasure.
Before we say goodbye, how do we find the book?
The book is on Amazon. It's called Learning to Think Strategically. It's on Amazon, and I would invite anybody who's interested to buy the book and also to contact us if they're interested with our learning labs.
All right, Doctor. I know you have an interview on another station, I think, coming up in about 20 seconds. So thank you for being with us today, Doctor.
Thank you, Larry. I appreciate it. Thanks.
All
Bye.
right, we'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill.